All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our webinar on the free speech community within the Carillon communities. We're really excited that you're here. We're really excited that you were interested in Carillon and that you submitted your interest form, and hope that you'll be joining us this fall. This evening is really an opportunity for you all to learn a little bit more about this particular community within Carillon. Learn about the course, learn about the student experience, and of course, we'll reserve a good amount of time for some questions toward the end of the webinar. So you'll see on your Zoom toolbar, there's a Q&A button. If at any point you have a question that comes up, go ahead and type that using that feature, and those questions will queue up for us. And what we're going to do is just save those until closer to the end, and then we're going to get through all of your questions because we know you might have some questions. So what we have today is just sort of an overview that will be provided by Professor Cynthia Martin. And then we have one of our students, Sunny, who will sort of talk about what the student experience is like in Carillon, which is really great. And then, like I said, we'll conclude with that question and answer portion as well. Yeah. I also think I didn't introduce myself. So my name is Ben Beltran. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the assistant director of the Carillon communities, and really excited to be here with you all. So there's our agenda for today, like I said. And yeah, so without further ado, I'm really excited to turn it over to Professor Martin.
All right, thanks for that, Ben. And yes, thanks, Sunny, also for joining us, and for all the rest of you for coming in to see what this might be all about if you were to join us in the Carillon Free Speech community. So just a little bit about me and Carillon and my connection to Carillon in the number of years that I have been connected with it. So I am actually a professor of Russian and the program head of the Russian program here at the University of Maryland. I really will date myself if I tell you this, but I've been on campus longer than email. We got our very first email in 1993, and I came to campus in 1990. So I've been on campus a very long time. It's a spectacular place. I've loved it so much I never left, let's put it that way. So I teach, in addition to participating in the Carillon, I teach Russian language, literature, culture, the I-Series course. For non-Carillon students, I do a version of the I-Series course as well. So the I-Series courses, I don't know how much you've been sort of informed about what is an I-Series course. So I like to think of I-Series as being about ideas. That's going to be on my next slide. But all of them have a big question. All of the I-Series courses, and therefore the Carillon courses, all of them are supposed to have a big question that's sort of an overarching theme that kind of drives the semester. And so ours is about free speech and why free speech is so essential to a democracy and such a threat to totalitarian regimes. And so with my experience in Russia, studying it my entire adult life, I came to it as a sophomore in college, but I've been studying it, the area, the country. I'm fluent in Russian. I lived there for a number of years. I worked there for a number of years. I'm professionally and personally connected to the Russian-speaking world, the Russophone world. And I actually lived there before the Soviet Union fell apart, traveled there many times since then. But we will look at this question, why is it so essential to a democracy and such a threat to totalitarian regimes, by looking at this through this comparative lens, right, about the issues of the history of free speech in the US and the history of free speech, or lack thereof, the repression and suppression of it in Russia, as an example of a totalitarian regime. But of course, we'll be able to see similarities. All totalitarian regimes can't abide free speech because it's such a threat. And so we want to kind of investigate that. Why is speech, it's just words, why is it such a threat? So the team project that you work on in Carillon, so what's really very cool about Carillon is that you are able to be in the same class with other students at Carillon, live in the same area, you know all about that. And then, so therefore it makes it really easy for you to work on team projects together because you're kind of living in the same dorm. And our team projects are basically debates. We will engage fearlessly. It's a word all over campus. Fearless Terps, fearlessly will engage fearlessly with civility and humility. There's not a lot of that going around these days, but we're gonna model that ourselves. topics of contemporary interest. So that's sort of the team project is you will be put in debate team and you will prepare. I'll say a little bit more of that with the next slide. So Ben, you can go on the next slide. You will prepare for debates by the end of the semester. So I already mentioned this. We're not going to bowl you over with the PowerPoint slides. We only have, I don't know, 6 or 7 of them or 8 of them. So just bear with us here. But, you know, the I-Series courses are about big ideas. And I also think of that I standing for things like inquiry, investigation, etc. And so the propensity to ask questions, right, is really very much a kind of a human propensity. And it is required to pursue to be a critical thinker, that you ask questions, that you investigate, that you inquire, right? And that asking questions falls under the umbrella of sort of free speech. Why can't I ask? Well, what about this? Why can't I ask? Well, what about that? So asking questions is basically challenging, right? It's challenging assumptions. It's challenging what narratives. That's a word that we throw around all the time now. So that seems to be a human propensity to sort of push back or to ask questions about things. And so those are the big idea courses on campus, the inquiry courses. So like I said, we'll look at this question about free speech in the context of a democratic tradition, what we would consider to be a democratic tradition. And we're going to have to talk about what do we mean by that? What do we mean by democracy or Western liberal democracy, from which, you know, the American tradition comes? And what do we mean by a totalitarian regime? What is that? We're not just going to assume that everybody understands those labels. And we'll do that through the lens of Russian and American experience. Next slide. So a typical class. So you meet twice a week. I think the class on the schedule is for Tuesday, Thursday mornings at the moment. It shouldn't change. Students are will be starting to register in the spring. But a typical class, I would assign before our first class of the week or the first class of a block, readings, videos, something for you to engage with. I think early on, we look at some of the foundational documents in both places to say, well, what are they saying? And then how does that play out in reality? To post some sort of a reflection before class. These are generally not graded. They're just incomplete. So you have to do them to be engaged in the material, but very low stakes in terms of grade, but very high stakes in terms of engagement, so that the whole class is engaged. And then during class, we have lots of discussions. It's a kind of a collaborative discussion time. I generally have 3 or 4 guest speakers that come in from different places, not just on campus, but also that do work in this space. And that's what a typical kind of Tuesday, Thursday class would look like. And then the team project is to work with the team throughout the semester to prepare for debates on contemporary speech issues. The way I organize those is to have a question, a prompt sort of for that debate. For example, there's a lot of talk about hate speech, and hate speech is protected by the First Amendment currently. There's no legislation that doesn't protect, or that outlaws or criminalizes, let's say, what is normally referred to as hate speech. There are laws that criminalize hate crimes, which is different than hate speech, but there are no laws that criminalize quote unquote hate speech. So a prompt might be for 2 debate teams. The First Amendment currently protects hate speech, and it should. So there's a prompt. So it should or it shouldn't is our question, right? But there's the prompt, right? So 2 teams will be assigned to that, but the trick is, the way we do it is, you don't get to pick which side you want to argue, and I don't pick which side you're going to argue. You have to prepare both sides. And neither side knows, and nobody knows which side you have to argue until the moment of the debate. So you come to class toward the end of the semester when we're doing these debates, all good-naturedly with a lot of civility and humility, that we don't all have all the answers to everything. And each team will have had to investigate, what does each side of that question think? People who believe on one side and on the other side, what do they actually think? And you would have to make the argument from the position as though you believe that. So the only way to engage in civil discourse with someone of an opposing view is to try to understand why they think what they think and what they think. So both teams will have to prepare both sides And then we'll come to class and we do things like flip a coin or roll the dice on the screen or something like that. And then we say, okay, somebody pick a number closer to this, and then you get to decide which one you're going to do. So you work sort of on a contemporary issue, having to really understand both sides of an argument or multiple aspects of the argument. Because that's what we're not seeing a lot of these days. People dig in, well, I believe this and this is why I believe it, and anybody who doesn't agree with me is just wrong. Okay, but why do they believe what they believe? You can still end up with your own position at the end of it, but you'll be in a much stronger position if you can argue from the position of why the other person may believe what they believe. So we'll examine both sides. We'll practice articulating multiple aspects. And like I said, what's really important is that we engage with this sort of humility that none of us have all of the answers to all of these complex issues, and therefore we have to respectfully learn to listen to someone else's views. So that's sort of how the course runs. Lots of low stakes in terms of grade assignments that you have to do to keep us engaged. A couple of reflections. Where there are no right or wrong answers, and the debate is the big centerpiece. Next slide. I think we're just about done here. Now we're going to move to Sunny. We'll come back to questions a little bit later.
Hello, my name is Sunny. I'm a current Carillon student. I'm a freshman. I'm a mathematics and biology double major, and I was part of the arts and activism community. So I specifically chose arts and activism because you see a lot of times in history, there's a lot of relation between art and activism. And I kind of wanted to explore that interaction and that connection a bit more. I am interested in art, and I've always been interested in observing activism and even possibly participating in it. The most memorable part from my community was our final project, which we essentially had to combine art and activism and kind of create our own setup of some sort of activist empowerment almost. We had to set something up that combined these two aspects, and my team set up we call it the period pantry. And essentially what that was we collected period products as a means of addressing the expensive period products that are around the US today. So that was sort of the activist aspect of it. In terms of the art part, we created this big meter almost as a progress meter in the shape of a tampon, and we filled that out as we collected more donations. The biggest takeaway was in regards to the main question, which was, can art affect social change? And through the numerous lectures and through our own interaction and experience of setting up activism, we answered this question. And me personally, I believe that art can affect social change, and that's sort of what I learned. And you can see plenty of examples in the past, in the present as well. So that was really interesting. In terms of general experience in the class and in Carillon, I think one of the main appeals of the Carillon community is this hands-on experience and the hands-on opportunities that you will get. It's not just lectures and learning, it's also about applying the knowledge and sort of making it your own and interpreting it, which is really important. And also there's this really close-knit group that you'll form, whether that's in the classroom with people of the same community or just in the dorm area, because you're all living together. And it's a great way to make friends. So yeah, it was a very valuable experience, and I really encourage everybody to join.
Okay, so I don't see any questions right now. What I'll actually do is I'll ask our attendees to go ahead and type some questions for us. And while you're doing that, I'm going to actually just quickly run through the last couple slides with some important updates, but please put some questions in there. Sunny was in a different community in Carillon, but can certainly speak more to the student experience if you have questions about that. And of course, Professor Martin can answer questions about free speech in her course. So as folks are typing, just some important dates to keep in mind. We do have some admitted student open houses coming up. There's one tomorrow, and then there's a few more. One of them is virtual. So you may have signed up for that. If you didn't, feel free to check to see if there's still openings, but that's a great way to see our campus and get to know the university sort of as a whole. And in addition, we will have a presence there. Carillon will do an info session at each of those open houses. So hopefully we can maybe connect with some of you there. A couple of deadlines that are both on May 1st that I want to put on your radar. May 1st is the deadline for confirming your enrollment. So if you are choosing to come to the University of Maryland, which we hope you do, you gotta let us know by that date. And that's also the date that you want to submit your housing and dining agreement. And so for students who live in, or for students who are in Carillon, our hope is that you live in one of our 2 residence halls where we will house students next year. And that is Easton Hall and Hagerstown Hall. So when you submit that and you have sort of indicated that you're in Carillon, that's where you will be placed. So those are just a couple of deadlines to be mindful of. And then some contact info as well. Certainly we have some time to answer some of your questions this evening, but if other questions arise, that's our email address, that's my phone number, you can reach out to me. And we do have some social media as well. In particular, our Instagram is pretty cool if you want to see some of the stuff that we have going on. So definitely feel free to check that out as well. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to take a look at the questions. So the first question I can go ahead and answer, which is, do you live with your community for all 4 years? The answer to that question is that Carillon is just a 1-year program, right? So when you are in Carillon, like I said, you'll end up in either Easton or Hagerstown. You'll be living with other Carillon students, regardless of their community, right? So if you're in free speech, you could have a roommate or a floor mate who is arts and activism or visualizing knowledge, all these different communities we have. And you live there for a year. And so, yeah, so Carillon is just for your first year on campus. Another question is about the residence halls and how far they are from the main campus. From my perspective, there's a lot of residence halls in, so Easton and Hagerstown are sort of located on our North Campus, which is where the majority of our first year students live. I don't know, Sunny, how long is your walk to class? I'd be curious to hear your perspective on that.
Well, it depends. There are some classes that are closer to the Easton and Hagerstown area, but if you're going to classes in South Campus, that is obviously going to be further. I think for me, most of my classes are in the math and science area. It's about like a 10-ish minute walk, 10 to 15 minute walk. It's not that far. And also the view is very nice on a good weather day.
Yep. Yeah, it's a fairly large campus. I think 10 to 15 minutes walking to the class is probably pretty average, right? Yeah, so absolutely. See another question here about roommates. Yeah, so that's a great question. So as I said before, your roommates and who you're sort of living with or even around will just be a mixture of all Carillon students. So you won't necessarily have a roommate who's also a member of the free speech community. That's sort of randomized. That's a great question as well. Any other questions that folks have, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. I think there's also a button to request to be sort of unmuted, so you could do that as well. Here's another question about roommates. Yeah, so the roommate process goes through resident life. And so basically there's a roommate request process. And I think the roommate request is actually due a little bit after the housing and dining agreement. I would recommend that you sort of reach out to resident life about questions with roommates. But yes, broadly, you can request a roommate and you have still a good amount of time to be able to request a roommate. Otherwise, they just sort of pair you with someone. And I think that there's information that you can submit to them where they try to pair you with someone who has similar interests or has a similar desire has a similar taste in living arrangements and things like that.
Also, in regards to the roommate selection, after you fill in like some information about your preferences, you get matched, as Ben said, to people with similar interests. And you can also like chat with these people, so you can talk with them and interact with them, and before you decide if you want to room with them. So definitely do that.
Yeah. And another note about that too, if you're someone who's requesting a roommate, our hope is that you're rooming with someone who is also in Carillon. We understand that some students might have a roommate request that's with someone who is not in the program. We do allow that. Just know that students who choose a roommate who's not in Carillon, you'll be placed in Hagerstown Hall. So Easton is reserved just for Carillon students.
I would add a couple of things about the advantages of being in Carillon from the faculty perspective, and also as a freshman, and also on a big campus like this. So one is that you take an I-Series course, which counts as a general ed requirement that everybody has to take a couple of those. But the one that you register for is limited only to Carillon students in this community. So everybody in that class is participating in the Carillon community and in whatever team project it is, which is very different when I run the class for non-Carillon, because then it's just everybody is from all over the place, and they're not all living together, and there isn't the same sense of like community inside of the class, for example. Because the actual courses are limited just to Carillon students, and that says that on the schedule. So non-Carillon students can't even register for the courses that are for Carillon students. And then one of the things that I always like when I do this for non-Carillon students, the university usually makes me, I guess, put about 60 seats in there, 60 to 80 seats for a regular I-Series course. In this case, our target is, keeping it around 30. And so I'm much happier with a section that's only that big or smaller, in that range of, 20 to 30, something like that. So I do them up to 60, but I very much prefer, from my perspective, to have this kind of a size. And it allows me to get to know the students better. It allows them to get to know each other better when it's this size and not double this size. The campus is big, right? This is a big state institution, and having a place like Carillon is sort of a home that is much smaller in a very big universe, right? And that I encourage all freshmen to sort of find that. So we're used to that in the Russian program, because it's usually a very small group of majors, et cetera. So we're used to that. So it kind of happens automatically, kind of organically for us in the Russian program and some of the other language programs on campus, which I would encourage you to look at too, is the foreign language programs, because they provide that same kind of sort of hub for, being on the larger campus. But Carillon really has that advantage. You get to know your faculty members better. You get to interact with them better. Carillon has the ability to allow us to take field trips, to fund them. I will have students in the Carillon course. There's always a Supreme Court case. There are a few older Supreme Court cases that we'll listen to, that you have the audio. The audios are available, right? So we just go listen to them. That might be one of the weekly assignments, is go listen to case such and such and come to class prepared to discuss. But if there are, I'm always on the lookout for ones that are happening during the semester that were in the course. And if by chance that now that we're post-pandemic restrictions, we may be able to take a visit to the Supreme Court. We might be able to take a visit on a day when there are no arguments happening, so you can go in and tour the building on a day when arguments are happening. If it's not one of these like majorly blockbuster cases, where you might even be able to get in and in the 3-minute line, go into 3 minutes and hear 3 minutes of the arguments happening. So this allows, I know last year I was co-teaching in one of the Carillon programs, and the faculty member who was leading it took them to Great Falls to see sort of carvings on the rocks that are thousands and thousands of years old, right under our noses. So there's so many resources in the Washington, D.C. area, and Carillon is able to sort of support sort of group and class outings and excursions, which is also another added benefit of the Carillon communities.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Professor Martin. The campus is so large, and we actually have a high proportion of our students, first year students, who participate in living learning programs such as Carillon, because it does do that, right? It makes it a little bit smaller. It facilitates some of those connections early on. So that's a really great point. Sunny, did you find that Carillon sort of gave you those connections and made things a little bit smaller for you in your first semester?
Oh yeah, definitely. I was able to form like a pretty close tie with my professor. So that was really nice, having somebody to like talk to and take advice from somebody that was familiar with campus and familiar with how things work. So it was really nice.
Yeah, always find a person. There's my advice on a big campus like this. When you want to do something and you can't find the information, and it's like, oh, but it seems like I should be able to do this. Why can't I do it? Always find a person. And Carillon gives you those people that you can find and be like, can I ask you about something? You know, is it possible to double major? Or, you know, can I do this and that? Can I have more than one minor? Like just silly questions that you might not even know that you have yet. But you will have people that you will be able to go to that will be able to answer it and save you lots of time trying to hunt for answers. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight and taking the time out of your schedules to learn a little bit more about Carillon, about the free speech community. Certainly, like I said, if you have more questions, I know that you're still sort of probably thinking through some of your college decisions. We're here to provide as much information about Carillon and the experience as we're able to. So definitely reach out, and we do hope to see you in the fall.
yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right.
Look forward to meeting you all in person. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Sunny.
Yeah, thanks all. Have a good
Yeah,
evening.
thank you, Ms. Martin.
See you soon.
Mhm.